Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hebets and McCallin Legal Guide to the upcoming 420 celebration here in Colorado. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Bryan Jarvis. If you can talk about your business and what's going on for 420.
All right, so well, obviously in Denver every year we got a lot going on for 420. I mean, we got just all the rallies, every concert you could ever imagine going on, every dispensary, probably about 600 of us that are doing all kinds of sales. I'm mainly going to be kind of sticking on edibles, just because, you know, it's a lot easier to not offend somebody, you know, while using an edible and going out about your daily business. I'm the manager at two locations here, the Oasis locations, medical, recreational in Denver. We also have another set of locations up at 4400 West 44th Avenue, Mountain View, Colorado, Medicinal Wellness Center. We'll be doing about 25% off all of our edibles, 100 milligram cap on recreational, obviously, that's the law there. And then about 25% off all of our cartridges. We'll also be doing a little free joint giveaways, some raffles, that kind of stuff. A little bit more on the medicinal side than recreational per se, just because of all the taxation and everything over there. You know, the big thing I just want to, you know, bring up in 420 is just safety there. You know, we don't want to offend anybody. This is a beautiful thing we have going on, and we just don't want to, you know, make public use, you know, too big of a nuisance to the community. You know, we have to understand that we have, you know, families, children just going about their daily lives, that this holiday may not mean anything to them whatsoever as it does to some of us. So just always be, you know, respectful to others, you know, try not to use too much in public, stick to maybe something like the vape pens that doesn't have an actual odor or smell or anything like that, just so we don't offend anybody and, you know, get this ruined for anybody. We don't want to see anyone get in trouble. We don't want to see anybody hurt. You know, last year's events, I want to comment on that. I don't think it was necessarily, you know, profiled the right way. You know, everybody kind of looked at it as, oh, this 420 celebration blew up. You know, we live in a metropolitan area. We've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of people gathering. It's just something that can happen, you know, as far as like the shooting, gang violence. I don't think it's something that needs to be directly in relation to our community that we have here.
Okay. Hey, Bryan, let me ask you a quick question. What does a person need to make a purchase on the recreation?
Say that again?
What does a person need to make a recreational purchase to come into your store?
On the recreational market, all you need is a valid 21-plus ID with a photo attached to it, government issued. So I can take anybody out of state as long as they have you know, a valid ID stating that they're 21 plus with a picture. I can take passports. I can also even take people from out of the country. I've had people stop in from the UK, from Ukraine. As long as everything's in English, I've had some people try to bring me, you know, foreign language IDs. There's nothing I can do there. I don't have a translator on hand, so there's nothing I can do on that end. But as long as it's Colorado ID, you know, you just have to have the long piece of paper. If you have a temporary, if it's got a hole punch or void punches through it, so always make sure you carry your temporary documents with a photo ID so I can make it verifiable.
Okay. Well, Bryan, I think that covers a lot. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. If you have any other questions, I got a couple minutes yet if you want to ask.
I think we're good. I think we're going to cover the legal questions, Bryan. So, but this is Bryan Jarvis with Medicinal Oasis. Check him out. He's got a great store, and we really appreciate your time, and they'll take really good care of you there.
My pleasure. It's good to meet you all. Feel free to stop in. I'd like to meet all of you.
All right.
Have a good one, guys.
Now, we appreciate that, Bryan. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about the law enforcement aspect of the upcoming 420 celebration. Obviously, there is, I think we can certainly count on, you know, an increased police presence, but that doesn't necessarily mean more arrests. As our next guest is going to address. I'm going to turn it over in a moment to Mark Carlson. Mark was a veteran detective of the Brighton Police Department here in Colorado, and is now in business for himself with Carlson Investigations. He's a private investigator, but he's still very much involved with law enforcement agencies and communities. So, Mark, I'm going to bring it over to you we just lost Mark, but we're going to try and get him back because he happens to be in Studio Hebets and McCallin right now, and we may be able to get to him live. In the meantime, I'm going to have we're going to take a question from, this is going to be Andy, who's joining us from Kansas, I believe. And he's going to have a question for Russell that Russ is going to field. So, Andy, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. You know, I'm from Kansas. I don't really know any of the rules about what I can and can't do. So I want to come out for the festival in a couple weeks. And I just want to know, you know, am I allowed to smoke in public? Am I allowed to bring it home with me? You know, I think a lot of questions along that front that somebody who doesn't live in Colorado, you know, just doesn't know the answers to.
Okay. Well, Andy, I appreciate your question. We're going to turn it over to Russell Hebets, who is my partner extraordinaire. And Russ, I think Andy just raised a few interesting questions. What do you think about those?
Well, those were very good questions. So, Andy, I'm sure a lot of people from out of state have similar questions. Since Amendment 64 was passed in Colorado, it still allows out-of-state residents to come to Colorado and purchase legal recreational marijuana in Colorado. Now, the limits are slightly lower, but you still will be able to purchase a really fair amount of marijuana coming from out of state. So from Kansas, you'll be able to come here. As Bryan had mentioned, on the recreational marijuana side, all you'll need to do is have that government-issued identification showing 21 plus, so you're not going to be able to do it if you're under 21, but as long as you're over 21, you will be able to purchase legal recreational marijuana in Colorado. Now, you will not be able to take that back to Kansas with you. So if you are stopped even 1 mile over the border, then you are breaking the law in Kansas and you can be prosecuted. And the fact that you originally purchased it legally is not going to be a defense. So until other states follow suit, you are not going to be able to transport any marijuana legally over state lines. And we've even heard some police agencies like Wyoming, they're actually looking for drivers coming back over the state line from Colorado, and they're really aware and on the lookout for people transporting marijuana, which was legal in Colorado, but immediately becomes illegal once it crosses over the state line.
Russ, I do have a couple quick follow-ups. Do you know what types of penalties there are associated with that? And then two, you know, you talk about driving across the state line. What about just driving while under the influence? Again, it's something I don't know, but what types of tests do cops do to see if you're under the influence? You know, are those, you know, physical tests or are they like chemical tests?
Sure, Andy. I'll answer these real briefly. First, penalties for marijuana possession in other states are going to vary state by state. So they're really going to be different in all 49 other states, absent Washington, which is the only other state that has legal marijuana. So for that, you'd have to look on the local statute books to figure that out. As far as driving under the influence of marijuana, police treat it just the same as driving under the influence of alcohol. So there are physical tests that police do right now, and these are things that test your balance, that test your coordination, that test divided attention tests, and it's very similar to DUI tests to see if your ability to safely operate a vehicle is impaired. There are some saliva tests which can test on the spot for THC. Those are not in use in Colorado yet. There is a movement to get those into use, but right now it is simply blood tests. So the police, you can agree to take a blood test, and then that will test the active amount of THC in your system. Is there not?
Okay. Well, thank you, Andy, for the question. Those were great questions, and I think there are questions on a lot of people's minds, so we appreciate those. And Russ, thanks for taking those. I think we got Mark back. So before we take another question from another panelist, I'm going to see if we can get Mark back up on here to talk about the law enforcement aspect of this whole thing. Mark, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Mark?
Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you. Yes, sir. Yeah. So if you could continue where you left off before we lost you a minute ago, tell us about what we can expect from the police. What are they going to be? Are they going to be in full force? Are they going to be arresting everybody? What's going on?
Well, I would suspect that the Denver police will be out in full force, particularly around the Civic Center 420 celebration. I think they'll have a large presence, but I don't think they're going to cause a lot of problems, hassle people. I don't think they're looking to make a lot of arrests. I think they just want to be seen. Obviously, they're going to be on the lookout for people who are causing a problem, whether it's property damage or getting out of control, that type of thing. I also would suspect that as long as you're in the area of the Civic Center Park, you're probably going to be okay, but I would bet that if they see people, visibly smoking marijuana outside of Civic Center Park, whether it's a 16 or somewhere else around Denver, that they're probably going to handle that a little bit differently. I also wouldn't be surprised if there were some sobriety-type checkpoints on the roads leaving Denver. I haven't heard anything specifically about that, but it would not surprise me at all if there were. So again, I think in general, if you're around the area of the Civic Center Park during the celebration, if you're not out of control, if you're not causing property damage or bothering somebody else, being a pain, that type of thing, I don't think the police are going to hassle people.
Okay, Mark, let me ask you a follow-up question. In the past, obviously, some of these rallies, for the most part, people who attend, they have not been cited, they have not been arrested. People, for example, the 420 rally that takes place at Civic Center Park at 4:20 p.m. Obviously, thousands of people go there. Same thing up in Boulder at either the CU campus or on the Pearl Street Mall. Not everybody gets arrested, but what do people need to be careful about? I mean, because they can still get arrested if they're using publicly. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can, but I think in the past, effective agencies where the celebrations are going on have kind of tried to confine it to a particular area. I think if anything, again, I think there'll be a police presence, sort of have the area cordoned off, if you will, be keeping an eye on people. But I think as long as you're within the confines of that area and you're not out of control or being, egregiously obvious with your marijuana consumption or something like that, if you're not seen selling it, those kind of things, I would bet they're pretty much going to leave you alone.
Okay. Okay. So, Mark, it sounds like the key is just don't draw attention to yourself. Stay under the radar, and you should be okay. Is that about right?
Well, I think that's a good rule in life, but especially for this particular celebration, yes.
Okay. All right, Mark. Well, again, this is Mark Carlson with Carlson Investigation Services. He is a private detective. He ex-law enforcement for a number of years, obviously. Knows what he's talking about. Mark, we really appreciate you joining our call today. All right.
Thanks very much, Colin.
Now we're gonna take I think one more question from another panelist. We've got Steve from Denver, and he's going to ask another question that Russell will field. Let's see if we can get Steve on here. Steve, how are you today?
Doing well. Yourself?
Never better. Thank you for joining us today, my friend.
Yeah, so it sounds like we were just...
What's on your mind?
It sounds like we were just addressing usage at the specifically at the rallies that'll be taking place in Denver and Boulder. but I was wondering if you guys could address just outside of that the legal guidelines around public use in general.
Russ?
So I will go ahead and jump in and take this one. So that's a very common question, and really a lot of people consider. And 64 passed in Colorado, it did not authorize public consumption. So we heard from Mark a little bit about what the police may be doing at the many rallies or concerts that are going to be going on around the city on 420. And the police are very unlikely to enforce the public use laws at those rallies. But there are prohibitions on the books for public consumption of marijuana. What that means from a practical standpoint for anyone on 420, if you are not at one of those rallies, if you are, for example, on the 16th Street Mall or somewhere else downtown, and you light up a joint on the street, if a police officer sees you, he will contact you, and you are breaking the law. So despite the fact that it's legal, you can buy it, you can carry it, but any consumption legally needs to be in private. It cannot be in public. So even the people who are at the park, at Civic Center Park, or at some of these other rallies, they're technically breaking the law. We just don't expect that to be enforced for those. But in any other area on a different day, that is enforced. And police in Colorado, in Denver, are still actively citing people for public consumption of marijuana.
Steve, did that take care of your question? Any follow-ups?
No, that addressed it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining the Hangout today, and appreciate your question. And I think that kind of covers what we wanted to do with this video. Really, we wanted to put together, a guide really for both people who live here in Colorado as well as people who may be visiting from out of state on the legal do's and don'ts. I think it is worth mentioning that no matter what, this is still illegal at the federal level, and everybody should be on notice that technically speaking, usage of marijuana and the selling, transport, whatever, of marijuana is still illegal at the federal level. And that said, obviously, we have not seen the feds intervene very much at all in Colorado. They only seem to get involved if there are really egregious violations of the law. So I think what Bryan mentioned earlier is absolutely right. We want to kind of make sure that these laws aren't being taken advantage of. We want to make sure people are being safe, and we want to make sure that people are having a good time. So we appreciate everybody who participated in the Hebets and McCallin Google Hangout for the legal guide to upcoming 420 Festival. We hope that everybody has a really good time. If anybody has any questions about anything we've talked about today or any criminal law issues in general, you can always call Russell or I at Hebets and McCallin. Our number is 303-756-3231, or you can visit our website at hebetsmccallin.com. Everybody have a safe and enjoyable Easter and 420. Thank you very much.
Thank you.